Hello, and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, Veenu Keller, and I want to welcome you to the Spanglish Roll Network and Her Network on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on the respective app stores and iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Today, I am so excited to have another amazing guest. Her name is Laura, and she is a master certified health and wellness practitioner. But what she is doing now with all of her amazing knowledge, she is diving into helping teens to create or establish their self-confidence. So today, her and I are just going to have this candid conversation, noting that I am not a licensed therapist. She's not a licensed therapist. This is just two coaches coming together with the knowledge and practice that we have working with families and teens for many, many years. And we're just going to have this real and raw discussion to help the world now realize, what does self-confidence even look like? When I work with a lot of the kids that I work with, one of the biggest issues, the underlining issues, is no self-worth and no self-esteem, which is no self-confidence whatsoever. So, of course, I was excited to meet Laura and find out that she also is in the same realm of coaching these kids. And so I wanted to bring her onto our show just so we can, again, have this conversation to help you listeners help your children. And it doesn't matter what age your children are. They can be young, they can be in their teens, and they can be older. As some of you all know from listening to my show previously, I have 6 kids from the ages of 28 all the way to 10-year-old twins. So it's still stuff I'm developing even with my older children and making sure that I'm able to reinforce it. So without further ado, let me just bring on Laura. Laura, welcome to Redefine Parenting. It is so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Veenu. It's great to be here.
So let's just start out with this. How did you get into, wanting to coach teens and realize that your niche is really about helping them with their confidence?
Well, it's kind of a combination of things. Partially, it was just this process of reflecting on my own teenage years and realizing the struggles I went through, and then also contrasting that with what my kids are going through these days. And it's funny because there's a lot of things that are similar. Things have not changed at all. And then there's other things that are starkly different, as you know.
So how old are your children?
9, 11, 13, and 14. So
Ah,
much more concentrated than your
yes,
spectrum.
yes. I will say my life is pretty colorful with all of them. And then I have a 5-year-old granddaughter too, right? So she really
Oh, it is.
brings the toddler thing going on. So,
Mhm.
one of the things that I notice, and I would love to get your definition, but self-confidence that I see in kids that they're lacking is the absolute certainty within themselves, that they
Mhm.
believe in themselves in order to make friends or to, play a sport or to do anything outside of themselves. It's just having enough confidence to have even a conversation with people. What are
Mhm.
you seeing as what's described as self-confidence?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's, it's just kind of a why I use the terms interchangeably a lot, but they really are separate things. So self-confidence is the innate ability to do things, to perform, and to do things kind of outside of this world, outside of, your house or in your house. But I mean, it's just kind of like an external thing, whereas self-esteem and self-worth are more of internal, like, are you good enough, and are you worthy? But those two things, or those three things, really play together, all very well.
Right. I would say the same thing. I always say self-worth is how you feel about yourself and self-esteem is how you see yourself.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
And then again, the self-confidence I think is intertwined between the two. It's like, do they
Hmm.
have enough worth to know that they're enough to have that conversation or to do something outside of themselves? And
Hmm.
how do they see themselves? And another thing that I feel like has been really a topic in my house, especially, is how kids dress. And one
Hmm.
of the things that I've been sharing with my kids is like, let your outsides reflect what your insides feel like. Can you
Mm.
imagine if every child started dressing like the way they felt? We would really get to see a visual of really what our kids are going through, because especially those kids that hide. Like, I have a lot of clients that they don't necessarily hide from me, and yet they hide so much from their parents. You
True.
know,
Very true. Oh yeah.
you see the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. It's almost like there's just these two worlds. There's what the parents are seeing, and then there's what the kids are experiencing. And there's not a lot of real clear, honest communication because, the things that you always talk about, they don't want to get judged. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get criticized because, it's really just a defense mechanism for themselves because, I think what we're going to talk about is how parents can help build that self-confidence, but I think kids just inherently know, oh gosh, I'm about to get criticized and that's going to, damage my self-confidence. So therefore, I'm just going to keep these things a secret, which is just even more isolating and even more losing connection, which is what everybody really needs.
Absolutely. And just to play off that, I mean, I think that also takes away from that self confidence, right? Because if they feel that there's any type of criticism going on or judgment or harsh opinion, however you want to say it,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to, step back, not want to share it, not want to do it. They're going to put on another mask
Mm-hmm.
that like, hey, I'm good. I'm good. I feel good. I'm not depressed. I'm happy. I'm not anxious. And inside, they're like dying inside. They're
Mm-hmm.
so afraid to express it. And it's interesting because I work with so many kids that have a great relationship with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. And sometimes, and most parents are like, but they tell me everything. And when I talk to them, I said, so tell me, if your mom is your best friend and you could tell your mom all this, how come she doesn't know this about you? And my client will say, because I don't want her to feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want her to feel bad if I tell her this. I don't want to hurt her, you know. And the other spectrum I get is somebody that doesn't have a great relationship with their parent. And it's like, so what stops you from talking to your mom? Ugh, because why bother? I'm not enough anyway. She doesn't have time. She doesn't hear me. All she wants to do is lecture me. And she's lecturing me about things that I'm not even talking to her about right now. It's like, so it's like both ends of the spectrum, right? But the truth is just like we need coaches, like to level up our life, to see what's next, to really help us see what we're not seeing. Because then we do have the child that's in the middle of that spectrum that doesn't know what they don't know that's really in them. You know,
Right. Right.
what's your experience with, looking at that as our spectrum? Like, can you share some stuff that you've been dealing with some of your clients?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, one thing I see kind of over and over again is um parents, they base their own self-worth and self-esteem and self-confidence on the success of their children. And so it's like,
Absolutely.
if, that's why, there's all this rage going on the football fields because parents are yelling at the referees and at each other because the parents want to win. And it's almost like they're forgetting this is for the kids. So that's what I see a lot of. And so I had, one example is a mom, or I had this girl who she tried out for a play and she didn't make the play. And her mom said, well, what did the other kids do that you didn't do? And it was the words were so damaging. It was so judgmental. It was just completely breaking connection. There was no empathy. And the daughter just shut down. And that's when she stopped talking to her mom. She like literally decided, like, I just don't want to share anymore because she felt so sad as it was. And then her mom just compounded the whole thing. So that's one way of just like that protection and just shutting down that communication.
Yeah, so you just touched on something so important. And so I had the honor of supporting a global youth leadership summit this weekend, and there
Mhm.
were some amazing speakers. And there's a speaker named Nick, and he said, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, it does. Like comparison steals our joy, comparison
Mhm.
steals our happiness. So, the child's already probably nervous to try out for the play. And when they think that they did their best, like even if your client left saying, you know what, even though I didn't make it, I'm so proud of myself because I did something that was difficult for me. I did something that I didn't think I can do. So I'm so excited that I did that. So they
Mhm.
actually got the win, whether they made the play or not. And I'm
I,
making this up. I don't know your client.
yeah.
And as soon as the parent says, so what didn't you do that Sally did?
Right.
You just took away that kid's win. You just took away your child's excitement that they did something new that they didn't want to do.
Hmm.
And it's like the next thing that comes up It's like, oh, try out for cheerleading. And in this child's mind, they're like, well, I don't feel comfortable trying out for cheerleading. And they get all this pressure. No, you should do it. You're really good. And they're so afraid because now their win isn't doing something they haven't done. Their win now is if I make it or not. And if I don't make it, then who am I? They lose their self-worth in that moment. They lose their self-confidence in that moment. And they definitely lose all their self-esteem in that moment.
Exactly. And I think one thing that we need to remind parents to focus on is the process and not the product. Just
Mm,
exactly how you explained it. It's like, well, that girl that got up on that stage, I mean, that was big in itself. And the girl who's, training to try out for cheerleading, that's a lot of work. It's very intensive. It takes a lot of skill. And then just because the result wasn't what they had wanted doesn't mean that everything they did before that wasn't worthy.
right. And I've said this on other shows. Our children are not our measurement tool. And I say that, and I also say, thank you, God, for not allowing them to do measurement tool. Because some of the things that my older kids do, I was like, okay, do people know that I'm your parent? and they're not. They're not. My children have made mistakes. My children have suffered the consequences for it, natural consequences that they get. And when they go through those challenges, I just ask them, like, what did you learn from this? And what are you going to do better? Because in that moment, it's not about me. What I raised them as and what I role modeled as, even though I still, parented out of my old baggage, which I'll touch on that in a second, they still know that what they've done, I would never approve of it. It would be so against what I've taught them, the values I taught them, and yet they still made that choice to do it. And that's what it is, freedom of choice. Our children have freedom of choice. We can set the rules and the boundaries, and as soon as they're out that door, all we can do is hope and pray that they have enough courage and enough confidence within themselves to stay true to the teachings and the values that they get from home. However, they have more time outside of those doors and being influenced than they do with us inside our home. So it's really about setting the foundation early. And just to go back to like parenting through our old baggage, if I grew up in a very strict home, it was, grew up in an Indian cultured home in America, which made it double difficult for me because you talk about comparison and like, well, she gets to do it. Why can't I? Well, they get to stay out after the street lights go on. Why can't I? They're girls too. They're my age. And I could never comprehend why my mom had those rules for me and the other kids didn't. And so with that, I also was bullied a lot. And the bullying became my internal language. And then my mom, I grew up in the era of the Gen X kids where we were the latchkey kids. And so my mom wasn't there a lot. She was a single mom. And so I didn't have at home what I needed to process, if you would, what was going on inside of me at school. And it just kind of escalated to make me feel suicidal at the age of 13. And so with that low self-worth, self-esteem, not feeling that I'm good enough, and then I have children years later. And what happens? I'm parenting them through that of a parent that doesn't have the self-worth and self-esteem, kind of like what you were saying. And so it comes out. So I want to live vicariously to them. And they were my measurement tools. Like, don't do that because I want to make sure people know that I'm a good parent. So if you act like that, or if you don't make the team, what do you mean you didn't make the team? Like, how am I going to face my friends when their sons made the team and you didn't make the team? And that was my mindset back then. That's how I used to parent because I was not able to put my baggage down and see through fresh eyes. And what I mean by that is what changed and why I brought this whole Redefine Parenting into existence is because of the trial and tribulations that I have been through of how I used to parent and how I parent now. Because now that I've healed my own wounds and I know my worth and I love myself and I have the self-confidence, I feel the self-esteem. I now raise my children, I say my new children, but my second go around, my twins, with my current husband differently. We listen, we hear them, we ask them, like, what does that look like to you? What does it mean to you not to get on it? And so, like, if my child was that one that tried out, instead of saying, well, why did they get on it and you didn't? What could you've done differently? I would just say, how was that? How did it make you feel? And tell me, what are like two of your biggest takeaways from trying out?
I love that because it's just so much giving them the ownership. I love like analogies, and for some reason, I'm always focused on food. But I talk to kids like about a birthday cake. When I was little, every year on my birthday, my mom would just bake a cake, and I got to decorate it. I got to use the icing and write my name, and do the little flowers. And so, when I talk to kids, I say, this is your cake. Like you are, your self-esteem, your self-worth. So don't let anybody else decorate your cake. And that honestly even includes
Love it.
yeah, that includes your parents. And if someone makes you feel bad, let's wipe off the icing and start over. And so now we're back to your cake again, and you decide. It's your decision about who you are and how you show up in this world and what your worth is, because no one else can decide that for you. Has to be like your own, choice and decision. But kind of what you were saying about, your first go around of kids and your second go around of kids, I kind of think of it as like scaffolding too. It's like parents are the scaffolding and the kids are this like kind of growing building. And so we have to be there. When you were the latchkey kid, your mom wasn't around to be that support and give you that safety and love and security that you needed, especially in those like really rough and rocky times in your life. So it's like we need to be there to kind of guide them, but we're not going to do it for them because they have to be able to go out in the world and do it for themselves. So we're just there as, there's this, I kind of think of it as a continuum. There's the parents who are trying to do everything for their kid, and they're almost like stealing that thunder, and, they want all the credit. And so their kids are going to have no self-esteem because, their parent did everything for them. And then there's the opposite, which is their parent wasn't around to support them. And you have to kind of like bring this like right kind of in the middle and get like a nice healthy balance.
I love that. And I just had a post on my social media earlier last week, and it said, something like, "Don't handicap your children by making their lives easy."
I love that.
That is like when we look at the different generations, like, I was, the Gen X kids, and then I raised millennium kids, and now we're in the Gen Z kids, right? So it's interesting to have two different generations that I'm raising at, like literally I'm raising,
Mm-hmm.
and to see the difference of, you know, my generation, we had to do it all. We had chores. Like our parents were working. We were latchkey kids. We had to do all the chores. We had to make sure everything was done. We grew up very independent because the kids weren't there. And then
Mm-hmm.
what we did, and I say this as an overall, like I'm not saying every single parent in the world did this, but
Right.
I will take ownership for me. I know
Mm-hmm.
I did this as a Gen X kid. When I raised my millennials, they were never going to hear I couldn't afford it. They were never going to hear I don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
They were never going to hear no, you can't. They never were going to hear, oh, you have to do all these chores first, because
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that I felt just like took my childhood away, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened is that they became lackadaisy. They became the entitled generation where, and I'm not saying all millennials are entitled. Like there's a lot of millennials that have grown up also with the entrepreneurship mindset now too. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing them now, right? We're seeing
Mm-hmm.
them take over businesses and stuff too.
Yeah.
So please note what I'm saying here. I'm just generalizing. Um, and I actually got these out of some books that I've been, listening to lately too, is it's just seen that way. And we start to see the different characteristics of the generations, the different generations. And now when we're going to the Gen Z, we're going back to teaching them the basics. It's helping them realize, okay, so the millennials, we felt so bad when we were growing up, we wanted to give them everything. And that didn't work out so well. So now
Mm-hmm.
let's go back to teaching the basics,
Mm-hmm.
on you have a chore. And it's interesting because I just had someone on my show the other day talking about this, that she started her kids chores at 2 years old. And it was so funny because like 2 or 3 days later, I saw a Facebook post that I copied from someone, and it said, what are the chores between 2 and 3? What are the chores between 4 and 6 or whatever? It just broke it down. I was like, oh my gosh. And a 2-year-old chore may be just, handing you their cup and their dishes, from the table. So they're taking ownership that I gotta clean up my mess or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just little things. And that is what gives these kids their worth, that you are worth being a part of our family.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after that conversation I had on this show, actually, because I learned from you guys as well. I started to enforce that the twins, they're 10, they should be doing a lot more than they were doing. So you have to do your own dishes. And the first thing they said was, am I going to get paid?
Yeah.
And I said, no. I said, do me or your dad get paid when we do the dishes? Do we get paid when we um, vacuum? Do we get paid when we sweep?
Mm-hmm.
It's called, we love you enough, we love this family enough that we want to contribute. This is your
Mm-hmm.
contribution. And you know what? It makes Daddy and I feel good that we get to contribute. So, what could you feel good about? Now they are helping me with the dog, they're helping me with the dishes, and they're not even asking to get paid. And now, when they do something extra, like my daughter brought in the trash can this morning, my husband's like, you just earned $1. She's like, what? What? So now Samuel's like, oh, I got it next week because it's not part of their chores. And so
Mm-hmm.
we want to reward that. When you go above and beyond, you get rewarded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But feel your self-worth, that you're worth being a part of this family and you are worth helping out and contributing to the family. And I think that is like a great way to start when we say, how do we start young, giving our kids their worth?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they're worth giving a chore to. They're worth it. They're not handicapped.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they're worth, learning this. They're worth contributing. So there's just different ways that we could already start to build that self-worth in our homes just by doing simple things like giving them chores and whatnot. So let's go into some of the things about self-confidence. So what are some of the tips or strategies, if you would, that you're teaching some of your clients that are teenagers? Maybe give an example of what a teenager was going through and some of the strategies that you shared with her that are seeing that are working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if I have someone that's feeling really bad, we look back and we say, well, when was a time that you did feel good, and what did you do at that time, and what were those feelings, and how can we recreate that into, the current state. So that's one thing that we spend a lot of time on, and that brings a lot to the surface when they're talking about that, because that's they're kind of having these self realizations of like, oh gosh, I didn't realize, and then it just lets their mind kind of fill in all these blanks they weren't aware of.
Oh, I love that. And so what you're actually doing is taking their success formula to feeling good.
Right.
You
Right.
know, you're giving them an opportunity to be like, wait, I have. And it's so funny. Today I had a client that, text me, and he was saying that, the more I'm getting closer to taking this job, like I'm having stomach pains, I have anxiety, whatnot. And I said, so what is showing up for you? What is showing up? What is it feeling like? Like, are you feeling like you're not going to be good enough? Just give him examples. And he's like, it's just self-doubt. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, how did you get this opportunity? Because someone, whether it's a parent or a friend or somebody, had to see your value enough for you to be offered this opportunity. So somebody believed in you, right?
Right.
That's the first thing. And the second thing I said when he said self doubt, I said, like you, has there ever been a time where you were excited to do something and you didn't know how it was going to work out, and you took the step anyway and you did it?
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, I can't really think of much. He's like, but maybe high school, finishing high school. I said, there you go. And you did it. And you didn't know if you were going to get through it, and you did it anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
again, and then I say, what had to happen for you to know that you can finish it? So just going through those questions, giving them that opportunity, it was so great to open that up to, because it eliminates that self-doubt or that lack
Mm-hmm.
of self-confidence. And that's what self-doubt is, right? You don't have confidence that you could get it done, yourself. So I love that strategy. you
Yeah,
know
or I'll even take like the smallest thing. Sometimes the smallest win. I'll have girls go through their school day and it's like, oh, nothing good happened, blah blah, and it's a lot of, all that. And then I'm like, okay, there had to be one good thing. And I'm like, it'll come down to something even as small as I made eye contact with someone. Great.
Beautiful.
Okay. So, I have a lot of girls who, they kind of have a lot of the social anxiety stuff. And so even saying hello to someone is a big deal, even feeling included in a, group project at school, they don't feel included, even though they're in this little circle, but they're just not like connecting. And so we just look at the smallest things. Okay. You made eye contact. Great. That's awesome. What can you do tomorrow that will kind of level it up a little bit?
I love, love, love that.
Hmm.
And you're so right. And that brings us into another thing is like, what are we seeing? How are kids displaying their lack of self-confidence? And one of the things you just hit on so big, and that is they're not having that social connection. They don't
Hmm.
know how to make friends.
Hmm.
And, they at this point will call a peer or acquaintance a friend just to say, I have a friend. And, working this camp the other day, somebody had made a mention on one of their teams when the speaker said, put in the chat who's your best friend. And someone in their group said, I don't have any friends.
Hmm.
And the 28 kids in that group said, yes, you do. You have 28 of us now.
Oh,
I just got chills when I said
yeah,
that.
I
Like,
know. That made me like tear up a little.
so, I mean, it's so interesting how many kids are going through this because I too have a lot of kids that don't, you know how to connect with people and they feel awkward and they feel left out and they feel like they don't belong.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've done with my own daughter is that I let her know weird is the new great. Weird is the new thing. Weird is exactly what everybody should be. Because if we're trying to be like everyone else, then who's going to have the job of being me?
Exactly. And you're going to be doing a terrible job at being other people. It's like you talk about building self-confidence. The best way to do that is to be yourself. Because
Yes,
who better can know you how to be you than you?
exactly. Exactly. And so, and I asked her, I said, well, what does weird mean? What does weird mean to you? She says, I don't know, just being different from people. I said, and tell me where anybody in this world is the same. And she'll name like, well, they're the same height or they're same skin color, same hair color. I said,
Hmm.
we all have similarities. We all
Hmm.
could say that, all the girls in your class have long hair or all the girls in your class have short hair. Like you could always find similarities.
Hmm.
But the gift is in the differences that we have. That's what the gift is in. And my husband is so great because ever since she was little, he would always tell her, and there's different versions of this. It's like he'll say something like, Sage, what's the number one thing a girl can wear? It's confidence. Or, what's the best thing a girl can wear? Confidence. What's the prettiest thing a girl can put on each morning? Confidence. And it was so beautiful because now that she's 10, that's becoming her internal language. And so when she comes to tasks at school that make her feel left out or not belong, she still feels her feels because we tell her, like, acknowledge what you're feeling and
Hmm.
remember who you are. Remember that the kids that don't want to play with you, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe they're not going to be in your circle. So go plug into someone who's going to fill your energy. We talk about the receptacle, don't plug into a dead receptacle because they're not going to light you up. Go plug into people that are going to actually light you up and find friends that actually want you because it takes more energy to push your way into a group than it is to just go and belong and be happy in a group.
Right. Kind of natural path of least resistance. But that made me think of something when you were talking, which was, kids get from, it's kind of like you could probably, you and I could discuss like the grade or the age that this starts to happen, but it obviously increases starting at, late elementary, intensely in middle school. And then, I think a little bit tapers off in high school just because high schools are bigger and people are more dispersed. But it's that feeling of rejection that
Mm,
is so incredibly powerful. And so it's like sometimes I need to talk through that with girls. And, we talk about what is this? What are you feeling? What does that mean? And the way I like to think of it is and describe it is, honestly, these kids are just scared. They're not feeling loved. They're not feeling connected. And so then you get into the whole bullying thing like, where does bullying come from? It's like, these kids do not feel good about themselves and they're just like spewing out their pain. It's like projectile vomiting their own pain. And so it's like, you just so happen to have like a nice kid just has to happens to be in the line of fire, it's like, whoa, 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 let's like break this down because you are wonderful and you have done nothing. And so let's, boost your confidence. And I hope and pray that the bully people, they need a boost of confidence too. And I hope that they can get that worked out.
I love that. And I agree with you. I mean, one of the subjects I talk about is bullying. And that's exactly it. They have low self-worth and self-esteem and low self-confidence, right? So they're looking for anybody else to allow them to take it from them, to boost them up. And I always
Yeah.
say nobody bullies quietly. Like, and people say, well, no, people do it anonymously on social media. I said, it's still loud just because they're not showing up to take credit. They're watching and they're feeling the empowerment of people
Mm-hmm.
commenting and chatting about it. Like
Yeah.
it builds them up because they don't know how else. They don't have a formula. Is something going on at their home? Is something happening to them with another friend? Like you never know what's going on in someone's life. You never do. It's, when they say don't judge a book by its cover, you really can't. You have to open up that book and read the story, and you got to hear the
Mm-hmm.
story to make an opinion about what that book is really about. And that's what we need to do with people too. We need to open them up and hear their story. We
Mm-hmm.
need to allow kids to know how to belong. And with COVID that happened, and shutting the world down for so long, our kids lost that connection. And so when parents were like, give me your phone, you can't be on, you know, uh, Xbox and all this stuff, it was taking away their social life because that's all they had.
Yeah. It's so true.
All they had.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I heard from another colleague of mine, they were saying how their child, who's like 14 or 15, was telling them and saying that, kids have really lost the skill of connecting and knowing how to connect with people and knowing how to make friends because they got so used to being on screens and texting that kids would now rather text, and this kid was saying you see it in class all the time, like you're sitting right next to somebody at lunch and you're texting them instead of talking to them.
Yes, I hear stories of that all the time. And, another thing was when, they didn't have to wear masks anymore, a lot of kids got very anxious about then showing their faces. It's like, wow, all this time everybody's complaining about the masks and then they get to be free. And it was very overwhelming for some kids. They didn't want to show their faces. It was
Yes.
just too vulnerable and I think too exposing for them because they just weren't used to that.
Right, right. So, again, so this shows up a lot. This low self confidence shows up that way, like not feeling like they belong, not feeling like they have friends. Another way that I see it show up is through feeling anxious, like these kids that feel
Mm-hmm.
like they have anxiety or they've had panic attacks. Again, I always describe anxiety a lack of certainty in something, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so if you don't know what the end result's going to be, if you don't know if, you're going to be judged doing it,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what you're going to look like when you're doing it or whatever, there's
Mm-hmm.
that lack of certainty in that. And so it can
Mm-hmm.
create that anxiousness. And so when you don't have self-confidence, this might show up a little bit more in
Mm-hmm.
your children. You might start to hear them say, I have a stomach ache. I don't really want to do it. Or I'm just
Mm-hmm.
too nervous. Please don't make me. I really don't. What I hear is like, you know, uh, Veenu, can you talk to my parents like they're not hearing me? I get that a lot. They're not hearing me. And so, and what I do is I encourage them. I give them the words. So what do you think your parents would need to hear? What's another way that you could say it? If they're not hearing you this way, what's your tonality? It's helping these kids to realize their tonality. Like, what is your tonality when you're talking to your parents? Because
Mm-hmm.
I have another family and I was doing like a three-way because it was time that we brought mom on so we can kind of solve what's going on in the home. And the daughter looked at her mom, she shook it, she was like, well, yeah. And she just went on, and I was like, "Ooh, I've never seen this girl this way." I was like,
Mm-hmm.
What is she doing to her mama?" And but that's what mom sees, and that's what
Mm,
shuts mom down, right? It's
mm,
hear what she's saying because all she's hearing is the attitude, the
mhm,
I gotta be right,
mhm,
you know.
mhm,
And so a lot of these attitudes also are trying to protect themselves. They're trying to feel strong enough to talk to their parents and it kind of gives them, just like the bully, right? It gives them that oomph of courage in that
Mhm.
moment to say something. So, what other ways are you seeing it, or do you have any comments about, you
Yeah,
know?
what you just said was really interesting because parents get so, there's a certain type that they want respect and they want to be spoken to with respect. And they have this very strong feeling of needing to be the authority. And so if child, teenager is sassy, has that attitude, it's really frowned upon and in that by that parent, and it creates a lot of friction and just way more disconnection. um, Ideally, I would suggest that a parent not, if you respect yourself, you don't have to worry so much if people respect you, if other people respect you, including your own child, because chances are they do respect you. They just can't verbalize it at that moment because they're just hurting or they have fear, like with anxiety or pain. And so it's just like, whoa, let's just like, everybody, the parent, your triggers are coming out. And if you can just like get those triggers kind of dealt with elsewhere and then come to your child with a clean slate and be like, a lot more flexible, like just like a bubble. It's like you can absorb your child's moods or your sassiness if you yourself are in a good place and you're doing your self-care and you're calm and you're feeling good about yourself. Then it's just gonna like create more connection if you can be there when your child is like hitting rock bottom.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You know, I was also going to talk about like their self image, which also has to do with their self confidence. Would you agree
Mm-hmm.
with that?
Totally. Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
I have a few of the teenagers that I'm coaching right now, and they're going through a lot. Like their parents, actually a handful of them, their parents are noticing that they're eating differently, that
Mm-hmm.
they're eating less, that they're eating like 1 or 2 meals a day, that they're working out more,
Mm-hmm.
or they're not eating a lot and they're not working out. Or some are overeating, like they're eating like all the time, while they're like watching TV and stuff. And so, one of the things that I do with my clients is like I have them do like a food journal because I don't think that they realize. I really don't think that they realize because it becomes such a habitual habit for them. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that they're only going to eat this because they want to stay this way. And it's funny because I asked one of my clients, I said, "So, what is it about your body that you don't like, or you feel that it's too big or too small?" And now this girl is really, really thin, like really thin. And she's like, "Well, my waist, I want it to be smaller." I said, "Okay, so let's go with that. What does smaller look like to you?" And she's like, "I mean, I don't know." And I said, "Is it a millimeter? Is it a centimeter less? Is it 2 inches?" I mean, and she's like, "Well, I don't know. I didn't think about that." I said, "Because you may lose an inch, and in your mind, you're like, it's still not smaller. It's still not
Mm-hmm.
smaller. You need a measurement tool. Like, what is the measurement that we're going by? You
Mm-hmm.
know?" And because I really believe that these kids are seeing it through these filters, and again, comparing,
Right.
you know, if you're 5'2" and your waist is tiny for you at 5'2" and your friend is 5'7"
Mm-hmm.
and she has a little bit more curve, but it's like skinny in the the waist, it's going to look different on camera.
Right. And
What
it's,
is comparing?
yeah, it's crazy that we've made it this whole conversation. We haven't once talked about social media. But that's what I'm seeing so much of is all the eating problems coming from seeing all these images, and they're just like, they can't get away from them. They can't because it's all this nutrition advice and fitness advice and, models and bikinis and girls. And it's just like, whoa, that's too much for an adult to handle, let alone a person who doesn't have their brain fully developed.
Right. And they don't at 13. I mean, our girls, their brains don't stop developing until 25 and boys 28. And so I know that, nutrition and wellness is part of your repertoire. It's what you're
Mhm.
certified as a wellness practitioner. So
Mhm.
what are some of these things, like what are some things our listeners can start doing and implementing if they are seeing this, if they are concerned about their kids, seeing themselves as not right, and they're watching them with their diet and whatnot? Like, what are some tips that you would give the families right now?
Well, I would talk about building them up in every other way. What's
Right.
a way you can volunteer in this world? Oh, I could go work at an animal shelter. Great, because you're great with animals. That has nothing to do with your size.
Mhm.
But it's a way you can give back to the world. You can spend your time. You could meet some cool people. It's like, let's focus on other things instead of hyper focus on what we look like.
I love it. I love that. I love it. And what about like with what they're eating? I always tell my families, like, if you feel they're eating so much sugar in the house, get rid of the
Mhm.
sugar. Like, get rid of the fat snacks, right? And what I call fat snacks is like the Chips Ahoy cookies, the Dorito chips, and just let's get rid of that stuff, and then have healthy choices for them to make.
Totally, totally agree. And I love the idea of the food log or the food journal, because that's when, one of the things parents ask me about is what are the signs I should be looking for as far as the anxiety and depression. It's like, it's all the lifestyle factors. It's like the sleeping, the eating, the movement, how much movement are they getting, and then the social connection, all those things. But as far as the eating, that could go in one of two ways: very drastically too small or very drastically too large. And so, kind of just like having a monitor on that. I don't 100% think there should be a total elimination of the sweets and the sugars and the snacks, because then it kind of they get that feeling of deprivation, and then if they go elsewhere to a party or a friend's house, then they're kind of like hoarding. So I try to just like encourage, just like use it as a celebration or a reward, or maybe not necessarily a reward, but it's just, that's not your main food. Candy is not food. Let's eat real food, and then as a treat you can have a piece of candy
Mhm.
after. But I don't want it to be take on too much power. Like, whereas like if we're saying no sugar, then it's almost like we're giving sugar this power. It's like this illicit
Mm,
drug. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I
we don't
do.
want,
I
like,
do.
yeah, yeah.
We in our house, we've made it a treat that, when you want a snack, you don't go for the Doritos. Like, we'll put them in their lunch. They'll get a bag of chips in their lunch, but it's not a snack they get. But what I noticed with kids is that it's so easy to access a bag of chips versus going and, cutting the apple, or
Hmm.
it's just, I mean, it's so they want easy access. So how can we make this like more easy access? And then with the healthier stuff, like, we have like cheese that we cut up because they like the cheese and the grapes and stuff. So
Hmm.
it's getting them, it's the mindset of not seeing that sugar is bad, but anything overdone is not great.
Correct.
And
Totally.
so, when I have these families and everything is sugar in their house,
Hmm.
then yeah, like, you need to take some of that out. And but I agree with you, is that let's not give it all the power, but replace it with healthy stuff.
Totally.
Replace it with like, um, you know, n- granola cereal or something like that versus Captain Crunch cereal.
Hmm.
There's ways that you can switch it out, is what I'm saying.
Hmm.
But I
And
definitely agree with you.
yeah, totally. And to get the kids involved, because what better time? It's summer. The kids are complaining of boredom. Okay, you're cooking dinner tonight. Or I should say that nicer. How would you like to cook dinner tonight? And my 9-year-old can cook dinner. Like, literally, I'm not kidding. From beginning to end, she can read a recipe. She can work on the stove. She knows how to cut. And I mean, talk about building self-confidence. She loves it when it's her day to cook dinner. And I even talked about how our schedule is gonna be incredibly busy, and I want each of my kids to take a day, and I'll help. I'll get the recipe organized or the food, but it's like, okay, you're on duty, and these kids are needing to create self-sufficiency for their whole life, but they get to have that feeling of being part of it, the process, and then they naturally are more excited about the healthier stuff because they did it.
Right. One of our, we have a comment from Lisa Thompson, and she was saying, we talk more about what the food does for your body,
Hmm.
um, in accomplishing goals, which is great. And then also talking about how sugar makes us cranky, angry. It creates acne. It makes us angry. It changes our mood. And I love that, because that's one of the things that we say in our house too, is that, is sugar helping you or is it taking away from you,
Hmm.
and what you want to do? But I
Hmm.
also, like she said, like baseball fuels your body. And that's the other thing, is that I think it's a component to really help kids take ownership of what they look like. It's setting them up to win, looking at their sleep patterns. How many hours of sleep do they need? Because sleep is part of the process. And especially when they're teenagers, they want to sleep less. Their brain is growing, they need some sleep. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't realize it. We have to be their frontal lobe for them because their frontal lobe is not fully developed.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is healthy exercise. Like they need that balance of exercise. And I'm going to tell you, us adults do too. So, I mean, I'm hearing myself when I'm saying this. Although I am starting pickleball tomorrow. So I'm going to start my exercise. And, and then the nutrition, looking
Mm-hmm.
at the different food groups. When I was growing up, there was 4 basic food groups and knowing like what a balanced diet looks like. And I love the other thing that you said is that your 9-year-old makes dinner. And that is huge because if they have an opportunity to see what they're making that goes into their body,
Mm-hmm.
having them start to understand the ingredients is on the box, helping
Mm-hmm.
them understand what these ingredients do and have them research it, like let them aid in their own rescue so they can start to realize, am I eating this because it makes me feel good? It's going to help my body? Or am I eating this because it's there and I'm bored? So it's helping them also realize like when they're eating, what they're eating, how they're eating. So I just brought this up because like you said, social media plays a big role in our self-confidence in with kids, but it
Mm-hmm.
also goes back to that whole comparison, like we were talking about in the very beginning, that
Mm-hmm.
when we compare, it steals our happiness. It steals our joy. It steals everything that we want to feel good about. Comparison takes that away. And so it's helping our children to recognize that they're good the way that they are and start, you know, helping them see what is good about them.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And that makes me think of something you said when we started this conversation, which I never got to say the word, but I know you all agree, is unconditional love. Because I said kids
mm,
safe, loved, and happy. And it's like, wait, let's make sure we're adding that word unconditional because a lot of times kids think they need to do something or perform in a certain way to receive that love. And if they don't, that's why you're seeing these kids shutting down and not talking to their parents because they're worried they're losing they're losing that connection and they're losing that love.
right. I love that. It's so true. And again, it's like we said that, you can feel like you're your best friend to your kid. And, I would also say that, and some may agree and some may not, and it is okay. In my model of my world, I rather be a parent to my child than their best friend because
Mm-hmm.
they can make other friends. They can never have another parent. And who's going to love them and want to guide them the best of my ability. And I want to be close to my daughter. I want my daughter and my sons, all my kids to feel like they can open up and talk to me about anything and that they have that open, safe, and trusting space with
Mm-hmm.
me to have
Mm-hmm.
that conversation where I'm not going to judge them. And yet I am not a fool to think that there's going to be things in their life that they're not going to share with me because A, like you said, they don't want to disappoint me.
Mm-hmm.
B, they don't want to hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
you know and so giving them grace also and making sure that my kids do have someone they can talk to. Like I always tell them, like, if you can't tell me, you could talk to this person and then this person, because they're people that I know that I can trust, that will give them and guide them in the right direction. And I want to make sure that my kids are not stuffing things down, because that also takes away their self-confidence, is when they have so much stuffed down that they don't even know what to do with it anymore. And these
Mm-hmm.
little things that they stack become one big ball of just problems, and they don't even know how to unstack it now because it's just all entwined in one,
Yeah, for sure.
you know.
Um, yeah, I love that idea of having another safe person that they can go to besides you, because there might be times when they are not feeling 100% comfortable. And that's a great way. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I know that like some of my clients, I see them not just because like they have a problem or anything. It's not even about a problem, because as you know, you've heard me say this too before, Laura, is that we don't have problems, we have opportunities.
Exactly.
You
The
know,
coaching.
it is. We have opportunities. It's not a problem, it's an opportunity. And yet when we look at that opportunity and we grow through that opportunity, they may have nothing else going on right now. And that is like the best time to grow your children. It's the best time to get involved in their life, see what's going on, asking them how they feel. One of the things that I say to my children in the morning is like, what kind of day are you going to have? Because I want to set them up to have some type of goal. What are their days going to be focused on? And, they'll say, well, I'm going to have a great day. Or I'm going to have an awesome day. I'm like, what does that look like to you? And then they'll describe what it looks like. And then as soon as they come home, the first thing I ask them is, how was your awesome day or good day or great day, however they described it. And we were joking the other day because I was talking about when they were little, they're twins, boy, girl twin. And Samuel would say, I'm going to have a Ninja Turtle day. And Sage would say, I'm going to have a princess day. And so that's when I got into like, well, tell me, what is a Ninja Turtle day going to look like? What is a princess day going to look like? And we've continued this, conversation every day. And now, they're in upper elementary school. But I think it's so important that we're creating that conversation with them, because it continues to let them know when we hear their meaning of things and we don't make a judgment about how they're seeing it or what they said. It helps them when they're heard and they're seen, they will start to feel more confident that they're worth it. So, Laura, is there anything else? We have like a minute or two left that, any golden nuggets that you want to say to the audience that's listening?
Well, it's just to kind of finish what you were just saying, which is, and then, if you're in that example, your child says, no, it wasn't the Ninja Turtle day I had hoped. This happened and it was something sad. Well, then I would say, well, what are you needing in this moment to, and what are you wanting to feel? And how are we going to come out of this? Because too often I think parents project, well, you need a hug, or you need this, or you need ice cream, or whatever. And it's just like, whoa, 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 let the kid do the talking. They'll tell you what they need. You just have to ask the question.
100%. 100%. And then I'm going to piggyback off that again, because another thing I'll ask him is, so if tomorrow's going to be a Ninja Turtle day for you, what is that going to look like? What do you need to do differently?
Oh, yes. I
Because
like that.
getting their mind to think like, I can solve this on my own. But I love that. Like, we cannot assume that if our kid falls, they want us to run out there, pick them up, and kiss their boo-boo. Not
Right.
all kids want that. Some
Right.
kids want to get out on the street and show everybody that they're tough enough to get up and get out of the street. And then they want you to do that when they get inside the house, not outside the house. So
Yeah.
asking our kids, what is it that you need in this moment? I love it. I love it. I love it.
Mhm.
So we're about out of time. Again, just one thing that you want to leave our audience with to think about when it comes to their child's self-confidence.
Yeah, it's just spend that time. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, just eye contact, quality conversations, sitting down, no distractions, no media, and just be there, kind of like the old days. Before all this craziness happened, just be in the moment and be connected. And that is going to do wonders for making your child feel loved and heard and seen, and all those beautiful words you always use to describe that, parent-child connection.
I love it. Thank you so much, Laura, for being a guest here. Thank you for all our listeners who tune in each week at 2:00 to hear the different types of ways that we as a group can redefine parenting. And all those that spent time commenting, we appreciate you. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.